Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And if you want to stay up to date with all the happenings in this The Clown Decade, then do subscribe to the channel and do become a member. Because today is the very latest in the woke being put away arsenal, that is the Labour Party, in that they are happily defending a person who oversaw one of the worst RAF base attacks we have seen this century, caused by two complete hooligan nobodies on e-scooters. I've gone through it all before, all you need to know is this. Two pro-Palestine activists, who are part of Palestine Action, which is now a terrorist group, broke into RAF Brize Norton last week and damaged military aircraft in a high-profile security breach at the UK's largest airbase. The attack cost the defence industry at least £30 million, and it is feared that the damage caused to the engine of one plane may render the aircraft unsafe to be used again and could cost £25 million to replace. So just to make that clear, Palestine Action have done multiple attacks to multiple facilities since 2022. In total, that's probably cost the United Kingdom £30 million in defence spending. And then added on top of that, one plane being damaged enough alone, because you can't exactly just modulise jet engines, you have to replace the whole damn thing, it will cost £25 million to replace. While the extent of the damage is still being investigated, it is thought that the red paint sprayed into the turbine of the engine had caused irreparable damage. So two absolute morons, hooded on e-scooters, just waltz straight into an airbase and cause tens of millions of pounds of damage. This is humiliating on every level. This is the sort of thing you do not want the enemies of your state to know, and it is not something that should be happening ever. Plenty of people have said these two should have been shot on sight, and yet that is basically illegal in the United Kingdom. Anyway, if you want to have a quick look at what the security at RAF Brize Norton was really like, just take a quick look at this video that is just straight from Google Maps. This is the type of security that we have at what is effectively the Midlands hub for the RAF. They damaged two planes that were used to fly over to Cyprus to then fight ISIS. It's quite an important hub, and all they really have is basically a pallet fence. There's some barbed wire on some of it and it just randomly stops. You can just climb over that with an e-scooter, and that's exactly what they did. This is a high-profile RAF base that the Royal Air Force are very proud of. And so, well, who is to blame? Well, obviously it's the commander of the base. And so Richard Tice threw out this tweet. RAF Brize Norton, keep safe and secure by a HR manager. Or sorry, an HR manager. Well done, folks. And you've got a little summary of Group Commander Louise Henton, OBE, ADC, BA, Honourant, MA, RAF. Group Captain Louise Henton joined the RAF in 2001 and took command of RAF Brize Norton in July 2024. She has served at RAF stations in the UK and completed worldwide deployments and detachments. Louise has completed command and staff appointments in personnel, media, recruitment programmes and plans and human resources. So when it says she was deployed, she was a personnel officer, and from that little summary, it looks like it wasn't much out of media relations, recruiting people, on-base programmes, and plans to do with human resources. In other words, not the type of person you would expect to be put in charge of a base to keep it secure. More the sort of person you would expect to sort out pay disputes. Promoted to Group Captain in August 2022, she was recently responsible for the delivery of modernisation of career management practices and protocols. Again, not much to do with security of the base. More to do with, as we say, human resources, but that's just all from the summary. I was interested to see what a personnel officer actually was, and you might be wondering why. It's because she is one, and that is effectively proven in the only RAF media I can actually find where she is involved. Here's a couple of stories involving her.
When I got to Shawbury, it was an RAF regiment warrant officer whose trade is predominantly male. A decision's only been made recently for females to enter that trade.
If you want to see the whole of this story, the link is in the description. I really only wanted to go through this because it gives you the personnel support officer role for Wing Commander Louise Henton. The whole story is pretty much just a stereotypical feminist story of, oh, I joined this, what was effectively a boys' club. A man I was working under wasn't too sure of me, then we became good friends, and it changed his mind on women in the Air Force, etc, etc. Perfectly fine story, I don't really have much of an issue with it. I just wanted to use this one to make it clear that she is a personnel support officer. And you'd also think you'd hear stuff about what she actually did, but it just sounds like she had a typical RAF office job with this story. But she got bored and moved over to an RAF base in the Falklands, and this was her story from there.
Whilst on the Falklands, there was an awful lot of wildlife that I got to see. I became slightly obsessed with penguins, as I never really thought about how many different types and species of penguins there are. So managing to get out and see gentoo penguins, which are quite small, rock hoppers, which do as the name says, but with absolutely fantastic eyebrows, to emperor penguins, and being able to crawl up close to them to get photographs of emperor penguins was absolutely amazing. So real opportunity down there.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't much blame her for this being what she says. Effectively, she will be asked, what is something unique in the RAF that you've managed to do? And I'm going to be honest, doing an office job that is a personnel support officers will go through is probably rather quite boring. So I'm not shocked that that's the only interesting thing she could come up with, but it really does not reflect particularly well on the RAF. That the chief commander in charge of security at some of the biggest RAF bases that we have in Britain, effectively their history is just, oh, I had a boss who was a man who ended up liking me, who didn't like women in the RAF at first, and I like penguins. Again, I don't blame that on her personally. I think circumstances in the RAF have meant that you really can't do much more interesting than that. I mean, I know nurses in the RAF who have far more interesting stories than this, but I don't exactly think they'll be the type of thing that they will say in press releases. So I don't want to embarrass her too much for this particularly. I do want to humiliate her for allowing £25 million of damage to be done on her watch, though. That should absolutely have consequences. But I also, as I say, was very interested to see what a personnel support officer was, so here is a YouTube video explaining half of it.
So today we're going to look at the personnel support trade, and the personnel support trade can be sent all over the world on their postings, to anywhere there's an RAF base, but also embassies and NATO positions throughout Europe, USA and Cyprus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not being funny, but I'd expect that from pretty much every RAF position, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, so can you tell us a bit more about your trade training at Worthy Down?
So at Worthy Down, there's an 8-week course that fully prepares you for life in the RAF and in the personnel support trade. This includes basic tasks right up to more complex, and it covers everything that you'll do in your job.
I hate to say it, but this is already very much looking like a what the hell do consultants even do? I mean, already it's like, what's in your training? Oh, well, you're trained in very basic to very complex stuff. It reminds me of this meme.
So what type of work do you do at McKinsey?
My focus these days is helping clients across industries with their e-commerce problems.
Like what specifically do you do?
Helping clients across those industries solve e-commerce as a problem.
You literally just said that.
If you've not seen that short, I highly recommend it. But effectively, yeah, I could not tell you from this training what they actually do, but they go into it. So let's see if it reminds me of that consultancy meme even more.
So, MOD main building, can you just talk us through what it is you actually do here and how you managed to find yourself posted here?
So my job within MOD main building is mainly administration, but there's a whole host of opportunities further in the future that hopefully I'll be able to get on board with.
In a team room with the rest of your McKinsey teammates together, and you're on a mission to solve a problem.
Yeah, I've already heard that one.
I think that's the last time I'll put that meme in there, because I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you. It does get funny. But again, oh, I'm a personnel officer, I've just done training. Oh, what do you do? Well, admin. Great. So you're experiencing an awful lot of admin stuff, and effectively, from what all I can gather, you are now in charge of an entire airbase. Absolutely astounding.
So being in the RAF, it's likely I'll deploy in the future to places such as Tampa Bay in Florida, Falkland Islands, Cyprus, and even the Middle East.
Yes, but what would you be doing? Like, being deployed, right, fine, you can get in fights, I suppose, but day to day, what would you be doing? I kind of understand what infantry would be doing, guard posts and what have you, but I have no idea what a personnel support officer does outside of admin HR roles.
Okay, and I can see you're not in the normal RAF attire and instead in civilian clothing. Can you tell us a bit more about why that is?
So because of the location of MOD main building and the security situation, we all wear civilian clothing apart from one day a week and for special occasions. Furthermore, it helps create a really informal working environment which is much more relaxed and enjoyable to be in.
So the security of the RAF says we are fine with pallet fences to defend £25 million jet engines, and also you can wear civilian clothing. By the way, the reason for that is effectively because of the Lee Rigby situation. You wear military uniform, you are a target in London. What does that say?
So if you could give one tip to anybody joining the RAF, what would that be?
So my one tip for anyone joining right now would be get on board with their fitness. It makes things so much easier in the RAF in general, but then when you're going through basic training as well, it just takes the edge off it and you can enjoy the course much more.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I still don't really know what a personnel support officer does.
Now, I hope that's given you an insight into the personnel support role.
No, I have literally no idea what they do other than push paper. Literally no idea. You have told me nothing. So I had to go further. I had to go over to LinkedIn. As a personal support officer, you will sit at the heart of the RAF, from supporting UK-based personnel to adventure sports and the opportunity to work and travel abroad. No 2 days will be the same, so what are you waiting for? The clip tells you absolutely nothing. Again, by the way, you can check yourself. I have literally no idea what a personnel support officer does, and so someone I have no idea what they did is now in charge of the RAF. Brize Norton, I mean, not in charge of the RAF itself. So yeah, I'm with Richard Tice. What the hell is going on? Having a look directly at the job description, which is where I found the first video as well. Job description. As an RAF personnel support officer, you will work across a range of specialities: infrastructure management, HR, development, account management, and media operations, to name a few. Again, infrastructure management, that could be security, I guess, but I think it's more to do with the people rather than actual infrastructure. HR, obviously, just... Why would you put someone like that in charge of a base with millions of pounds worth of military assets? Personnel officers vary in their roles. They develop a broad set of transferable skills, make them widely employable in other non-specialist areas. Apparently in charge of bases too, which end up with humiliating attacks. Anyway, your entry requirements are pretty standard, so I'm not going through that, but let's go through training and career. You'll begin your RAF career with initial officer training at the RAF College, Cranwell in Lincolnshire. You will follow a challenging 24-week course designed to develop your leadership and management skills. The course includes fitness development, military training, and academic study, as well as practice outdoor leadership challenges. That's all fine. That's good. I like to see that. And then it goes into specialist training. After initial officer training, you will follow a specialist training course at the Defence School of Personnel Administration, Worthy-down near Winchester. To ensure the 8-week training course keeps up to date with what the service requires, it is constantly evolving but focuses primarily on the management of personnel and finance. The training is scenario-based, covering the military HR officer's role on an RAF station and on operations, so you'll be able to develop your skills in a simulated practice environment. When you have completed your specialist training, you'll receive your first assignment. They have simulations for HR roles, is what I am taking from that. Don't get me wrong, they do their basic training and, work with live ammunition in initial officers training, sure, but the specialist training is effectively, you will have a high-paced office role where you will have to consider and find solutions to interpersonal disputes, I suppose. I mean, I always feel a bit bad being a bit uppity about HR, and especially in the RAF, because my sister is a HR manager, and it is a bit more complex than this, but at the end of the day, the basics are all kind of easy to make fun of, and certainly not the type of person I'd expect in charge of a base where national security is concerned. You'll join the RAF on an initial commission of 12 years and may be selected to serve on a pension-earning commission of 20 years service or age 40, whichever the later during this time. Promotion to the rank of flight lieutenant is on a time-served satisfactory service base after 3.5 years from completing IOT. Furthermore, promotion to squadron leader is above by competitive section. Yeah, I still have absolutely no idea what they really do day to day. I could not tell you, so I had to delve even further to the scum of Reddit. So, like a lot of people, I would suppose, and someone interested in joining the RAF basically had to ask what it actually is a personnel support officer, because it's all very vague, which I do have to agree with. Luckily, there was someone who actually was a personnel support officer and said this: I was recently accepted into IOT for a personal support officer. Although I'm yet to commence training, I did learn a great deal about it from my interview and have a good understanding. You have the responsibility of making sure that the personnel on the base are supported. Really, is that what a personnel support officer does? What does that mean? This could be in regard to pay, training and development, liaising with family, or roles such as service discipline, estate management. Say if there's a problem with accommodation, it would fall under the remit of the personal support officer. Media, this could be interviews, putting together tours, perhaps to do with the radio. You could go into recruitment and work in an AFCO, not too sure what that is. There are also pathways that would lead you into the MOD working in HR. The role is very varied, which is one of the reasons why it's so popular. You have the option to focus on one specific role, such as accounting and finance, or you could expand your portfolio and do a variety of roles when you change location. In regards to being sent overseas, it is indeed an option in the PSO trade. Every base needs personnel support, and within your first 5 years you are likely to be based overseas. I want to make it clear at this point, I'm not saying any of this is worthless. It's good to have someone who is dedicated effectively to sorting problems like this out. That's not what I have a problem with. I have a problem when you then put someone like this in charge of a base, and one of the inevitabilities of that is security ends up being a bit lax. Because these do not sound like these sort of people who are actually in charge of squadrons, in charge of overseeing a team of fighting men and women. Yeah, sure, you can be deployed, and yeah, sure, there aren't that many people who actually end up in real combat situations. However, there is such a thing as war games, and it isn't exactly sounding like the personal support officers are actually going to be involved in any sort of fighting, and therefore not experienced in the realm of security. That is what I'd expect many other officers on the base to be in charge of. That's where the problem comes in. I don't have a problem with personnel support officers as a concept. However, I do feel like an awful lot of these roles can be divvied out to other officers anyway. And I'm not going to lie, HR always felt like a bit of a make-work job rather than doing anything actually particularly useful, because from the sounds of it, it's just they do a load of jobs that no one else can be bothered with. Anyways, bring us back round to why I covered all of that. It was to cover the fact that Richard Tice pointed out that effectively she was a HR manager, and from all the information I can actually gather, and it had to actually come from Reddit because the RAF is so bad at explaining that this is a HR role, it is effectively just a HR role. Because I don't think the RAF really want people to know that they're joining just to have a basic HR job that probably underpays them. At least compared to what I know people in HR tend to actually get as a salary. But a lot of people on the Labour benches were not happy with this tweet. Here is Louise Jones, who had her say on the whole thing.
Louise Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Minister will know from my earlier question regarding force protection how important and seriously you take that issue, and it is right that that is the main focus today. But if I may, I would like to address one issue that reared its head over the weekend as one of the only female veterans in this Parliament. Unfortunately, certain pathetic little people took this incident and decided to come out of the woodwork and criticise people for doing their job whilst being female.
Well, okay, for a start, I'm pretty sure that that is not parliamentary convention to effectively throw insults like that out to other right honourable members. Within the House, I mean. Twitter's a whole different ballgame. Secondly, that's not what was said. That's not what was said at all. He said she was a HR manager, implying that her skill set probably was not applicable to base security. The proof of that is that there is £25 million worth of damage on one jet engine alone, let alone the rest of the damage they caused. So I'd be demanding an apology for this already.
I know, as a woman serving in the armed forces, every opportunity that has been given to women, we have earned through serving on operations and proving time and time again we are worthy to be there.
Yeah, okay, once again, this had nothing to do with you being a woman. And this is the thing I want to bring up. I was told since the election, because of the rise of reform, because of Donald Trump, woke was being put away. And okay, it's definitely happening to some degree. Pride was just a nothing this year. You heard basically nothing about Pride, which is good, okay? That is kind of woke being put away in one regard. But that's because largely the Proud event just turned into a massive fetish of, and the whole of the LGBTQ community has just, I put a Q at the end there, the whole of the gay community has just effectively turned into nothing but trans radical activists. Pretty much every gay person I know hates it now, so that's another reason that it's gone down the drain. Ideologically, these people are still the same. They still go on about trans people, despite what Keir Starmer says. And even going before that, feminism is still massively taking over their brains, and so any criticism of a woman, no matter how relevant and accurate it is, which, yes, putting a HR manager in charge of security of a base, or as a base overall, is a poor move, and directly led to £25 million worth of damage, but yet they have the nerve to come out and say that doesn't really matter, we have to talk about this attack on women. As if it's relevant to anything he said. He didn't even say she was a woman. It is them taking something that was not said, and running with it, and it's embarrassing. It's really 2014 territory, yet again. So at least we're going back.
I was very conscious when I was serving that I had to be perfect, because any fault or flaw that I showed would not be held just against me, but against all the women that I was serving with. Could the Minister stand up and say now to every woman serving in the armed forces that we respect and recognise their service?
He's recognising her service. That's why he said she's in charge of the base that managed to have a humiliating attack that cost £25 million worth in damages on one jet alone. What do you mean? That's recognising her service. What's your problem?
Minister.
Can I commend my more friend for her words there and for her service? It is outrageous, the comments that were made at the weekend about our serving military. I notice there's not a single Reform MP here for this statement.
I'm not actually sure what the statement's on, but to be absolutely fair, there's barely anyone in the House at this point anyway. This is quite typical, actually, for the House of Commons, and I don't think people really realise this, but it's fine. But also, on top of that, again, it's the accusing them of sexism. And it's not going to work again. It's like calling them racist. All it does is get them to rally. All it's going to do saying, oh, that 25 million doesn't really matter. What matters is that he had a go at the HR thing, and he did that because she's a woman, which isn't even true, by the way. The same thing would happen if it was a guy who was in HR. It's just, guess what? HR is mostly made up of women because it's an interpersonal job, which women tend to prefer. But this is the broadhead they've decided to go on, because this isn't the only clip about this, and hell, I've got to go through a whole tweet yet.
Let me be absolutely clear. I believe, on a cross-party basis, that all parties present in the chamber today back our forces. We don't take to Twitter to mock them. We respect service on a cross-party basis. We do not belittle senior officers based on their gender or experience.
Sorry, but why are we not allowed to mock and belittle senior officers who oversaw a humiliating attack on their base that cost, again, tens of millions of pounds? Why can we not mock them for that? Yes, I do respect the service, quite a lot actually. However, when we have embarrassing episodes like this, they are rightfully mocked, because this should never be happening. And it's even worse that our Parliament find it more worthy of their time to talk about people mocking this rather than actually deal with the situation as it stands. That is horrific, and it is why these parties are dying.
We need to be better than this. Just as we ask our armed forces to address cultural concerns, we need to be alive to that in our politics as well, calling out misogyny wherever it rears its ugly head. But let's send a united message from all those parties here present today that we back our armed forces, we want to see change in culture in our armed forces, and we value the contribution of everyone who serves, especially those brave women who have done so much to secure our national security in recent years.
I mean, what a line. We want to fight racism, sexism, obviously it's just sexism here, and we all go against reform, or we hate reform. And the line at the end, we back all the women who have helped our secure services. Yeah, it wasn't very secure, that's the big problem though. Anyway, as mentioned, Louise Jones went to Twitter to layer another statement on top of the one she already made, where she says, "Breaking my Twitter exile to make this message very clear. Over the weekend, pathetic little tweeters used the serious security incident at the RAF Brize Norton to attack an officer for her gender and career." Actually, it was just to attack her career. "As one of the very few female ex-mil MPs ever, I wanted to call this out. Every opportunity women have ever had in the armed forces we have earned through hard service in operations, showing repeatedly what we are capable of. None of it was gifted to us. People who have never risked so much as a fingernail for this country should remember that, and it goes without saying that this incident must be thoroughly investigated and there must be accountability." Sorry, but it's just the whole footnote part of this of, oh yeah, by the way, one of our RAF bases was broken into and now it's cost millions of pounds. That is a footnote compared to the complaints about sexism that wasn't even there. Or you can't have a go at HR roles. Women are in those roles. Again, the criticism, well, some of it obviously is deserved at Louise. It's also just the fact that this was a choice made by the RAF to put, not a woman, that bit doesn't matter, but someone whose experience is interpersonal skills rather than actually defending and securing a base was put in charge of defending and securing a base and obviously overseeing that it's run, which, you know, HR could help with. However, I think defending our own assets, millions of pounds worth of assets, is a much higher priority than that, but not to Parliament, as has been made quite clear. Anyway, this wasn't Parliament's only issue with Richard Tice. This was brought up again the very next day by another ex-RAF officer, Calvin Bailey MP. So let's see what he had to say.
In Armed Forces Week, will the Deputy Prime Minister join with me in paying tribute to my former colleagues at RAF Brize Norton?
What, that base where they just failed to stop 2 people from rushing in and damaging their equipment? No, I don't think so. It's amazing, isn't it? All those armed forces out there, and the only ones that deserve any attention are the ones that have spectacularly failed. If that does not give us a good insight into how Parliament has worked for the past few decades, I don't know what will.
I know she will share my horror that some on the opposition benches responded to that appalling attack on that base, not by recognising the consequences of 14 years of Conservative underinvestment in our defence, but by personally smearing one of our brave members of the Royal Air Force. Does she agree with...
Sorry, but again, it has to be asked, what did he actually say that was wrong? From what I can tell, and I went through it quite thoroughly, being a personal support officer effectively does put you in a HR role. And obviously she was managing this whole thing, which does make her a HR manager. And she was put in a position to keep Brize Norton safe and secure as a role as a HR manager, and it ended up not being particularly safe and secure. As you say, it was an appalling attack, and nothing was actually done to stop it from the looks of it. Again, the security of the damn thing was effectively some pallet fencing. What am I supposed to conclude from that other than that is good enough for a HR manager? And you could ask, well, how long was it a pallet fence, and was it like that for years? Yeah, it probably was. There's probably plenty of people who are to blame for this. However, if her job is to keep the base secure, the first thing I would do was extend that barbed wire fence at the very least.
Me and my honourable and gallant friend from North East Derbyshire that this Labour government will always support our armed forces, and that those shameful comments of Deputy Reform bring disgrace upon him and his party.
No, I'm with Richard Tice. I think she should be absolutely sacked and kicked out of the RAF for this. This is humiliating on every level, and the iron fist of the RAF really needs to be shown here. There can be no soft touches for this. She has to go. Again, we are being told we're in a war footing, and Parliament has now found more time to talk about Richard Tice saying don't put HR managers in charge of the security of bases than the actual security of Brize Norton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable and gallant friend speaks with great authenticity and authority on this matter. And the attack on the RAF Brize Norton was disgraceful. But what was even more disgraceful is Reform blaming the commanding officer, an accomplished woman who has served her country, rather than the criminals that were responsible.
So just to translate that into plain English, what the Deputy Prime Minister has just said, again, won't being put away, people, what she has just said is what is worse than an attack on an RAF base by a couple of hooligans that caused millions of pounds worth of damage. What is worse than that is Richard Tice saying the HR manager there did a bad job, who was in charge of that. That's apparently worse than the attack itself. No, that is obviously not the case. Woke being put away latest is feminism overriding literal national security. Do not take people who tell you woke is dying seriously. We are not past peak woke. This is one of the worst statements I think I've heard about feminism. Feminism is still alive and well. It's another beast that needs to die.
That's not leadership, Mr. Speaker, but we shouldn't expect anything better from the party of the Putin apologists.
It's quite funny to call Richard Tice that of all people. He relatively infamously actually went over to Ukraine a couple of times when he was Reform UK leader before Nigel Farage joined, and an awful lot of the online right were having a go at him because he was too pro-Ukraine. So very funny trying to say that about Richard Tice of all people, but still. They do not do details, they just have basic platitudes, and that's exactly what was just said there. Imagine saying that criticising a HR manager turned base commander is worse than the actual attack on the base itself. I can't even bring my head round to that position whatsoever. It's alien to me. Anyway, this clip was reacted to by James McMurdoch, the quiet Reform MP who was effectively just a paper candidate, and he said, an organised group of masked operatives breached the walls of a military base at the moment of intense global tension and caused £55 million worth of damage. I don't think it was quite that high, but it doesn't really matter. Undermining both the ability and the reputation of the entire nation. This is PMQs. The MP had the opportunity to shine a light on the devastating consequences of this abject failure, and instead he focused his outrage at the party that pointed out that the action had consequences and what happened was simply not good enough. Fair outrage and a totally wasted opportunity. Obviously Richard Tice retweeted this, and I imagine that that is largely his reaction to this, because the only thing Richard Tice has really directly said about all this was, well, in this tweet. The pathetic bleating of Labour and Lib Dem MPs because I called out incompetence at Brize Norton typifies everything wrong with the UK public sector. No one's held to account for actions, no one is fired, no one is held responsible. Result, poorer performance, lower productivity and weaker security. Why Reform UK is leading in all the national polls. Enough's enough. The country wants reform. And I think that's true. I think nobody really cares Richard Tice put this tweet out. I think everyone cares that now it's going to cost tens of millions more to get security back to where it should be and replace the assets that were damaged. He also had a couple of laughing emojis reacting to a David Betts tweet asking, has the Brize Norton base commander been promoted yet? Because at the end of the day, would you expect anything else? Because there is obviously going to be an inquiry into this, but they take so long, nothing ever seems to happen from them. Again, this is probably something Richard Tice is actually going to keep quite a close eye on, and it's why, while he does have some poor instincts on, say, energy policy, he is actually quite a good MP, to be quite honest with you. He's quite a few people's least favourite. I actually quite like him, though. Anyway, Starmer didn't have an awful lot to say on all this during the time he was celebrating the Windrush generation, saying this government will never forget the legacy of the Windrush generation, who laid the foundations for modern Britain. It was an honour to thank them in person this week and celebrate ongoing contributions of the Windrush generation. I mean, it's just such a ridiculous statement. I'm not even going to bother to comment on it more than just saying this is the wokest government we've ever had, and I'm fed up with people telling me that woke is indeed being put away. It's being put away in certain areas of America. Over here, it's not really changed. Anyway, as you can see, there was a whole PR video for that, but when it comes to Armed Forces Week, you just want to say thank you who work tirelessly to keep us safe. You represent the best of us. From those currently serving to cadets, veterans and military families, your spirit of duty and commitment to service inspires us. That's it, just a tweet. It's like getting an e-card at Christmas. And of course, there was barely anything said about the Brize Norton attack. However, at least they've made the Palestine Action Group a terrorist group. Anyway, to give them some credit, 4 have been arrested over Palestine Action raid on the RAF Brize Norton. I'd like to thank my girlfriend for notifying me of this. A woman and 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of a terror offence, while another woman is suspected of assisting an offender. Yeah, put them all in jail for life for all I care. We cannot tolerate things like this. But knowing judicial reviews and things like that, they'll probably get, I don't know, 2 weeks community service, because at the end of the day half the judiciary actually support this because we are run by absolute maniacs. But yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. Early days for this, 4 people arrested, not really much more to say on that other than thank God they were arrested. Anyway, I think with that will cover this episode today. Shill time. If you enjoy what I do, you'll enjoy the other work I do, such as the streams, which is Laughing at the Guardian coming out tomorrow at 8 PM, Tosh Talks over on the Worcester Club at 9 PM Tuesday, and the Subnautica playthrough will carry on next Thursday. Videos obviously out as and when I can make them, but do also subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Great ways to help out the channel. If you can spare a bit of money, you can also become a member or leave super chats or super thanks in any video that I do. But I think with that, it's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.